What is up, everyone? I'm Dr. Ray Gorman from Engage Movement, and I am joined here by Dr. Bryan Guzski of Motive Physical Therapy and Wellness out of Rochester, correct? Rochester, New York.
Yeah, you got it.
Bryan, thanks for joining us, man. Bryan is a program alum at this point. He came in, did our performance provider growth model, had a different name when you went through it. But Bryan, give the people watching a little insight into kind of your background, your journey, and ultimately maybe some of the things that led us into conversation.
Yeah, so as you said, Ray, I'm in Rochester, New York. I worked in a large hospital-based outpatient practice for 8 years. During that time, I had a number of really awesome opportunities. I was the director of an orthopedic residency program. I was leading a spine specialized spine team. So I really had great experience, great exposure. Especially even in leadership during that time. But ultimately, by the end of my time there, I wasn't feeling totally fulfilled, and I
Yeah.
knew there were some other personal and professional goals that I had, and I needed to make a change. So towards the end of my time there, I was able to go back to school. So I got my master's in business administration, a master's in medical management. During that time, I had a lot of really good conversations with really smart people and people outside of the physical therapy or health space and industry that just kind of opened my eyes to other possibilities. So, yeah, 2 years ago, I kind of made a jump to start my own thing. I started a mobile, kind of a mobile concierge practice.
Yeah,
That's where I began. As you and I have talked about, Ray, lowest kind of barrier to entry
for
and
sure.
lowest
A lot
amount
of
of
people do
hurdles.
it.
Yeah. So, and like least risk. So, I was really attracted to that model to start. So I started that and, I enjoyed that and I still do a little bit of it, but, ultimately knew that I wanted to be in a physical space and bring people to me. So it was kind of a stepping stone or a bridge to more of what I'm doing now, which is being in a physical space and seeing
Yeah.
people.
And that was one of the bigger changes that we had talked about, when we were working together was kind of the limitations of that concierge mobile model from an efficiency standpoint. But you hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of people like the lower risk that comes along with that. Now, when you had 2 years ago, remind me, were you still working part time in a clinic? That correct? You were working part-time with your mobile practice, just so everybody kinda has the background of, like, what it was like when we first started working together.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So when we first started working together, I was kind of wrapping up my per diem work. But yeah, I kind of
Yeah,
phased it
you were
out where
working per diem, that's right.
I went from full time and setting up my business, with the state, taking care of all the paperwork, finding a lawyer, finding an accountant, all those steps,
Yeah.
working full time to doing per diem and part time work. And then by the time you and I started working together, I think I was just phasing out of that.
Yeah, and to those of you, like, watching this, that is an excellent strategy, right? I wanna highlight that, like, this doesn't have to be a burn the ships mentality of you quit your job, you go all in on your business, like, you've got a family, you've got a house, you've got bills to pay, but, creating an exit plan is really something that we ultimately always talk about, like, how are you gonna transition out? And what you did, I think, was really smart, going from part-time to per diem, maximizing your flexibility while also, building a business with more upside. One of the things that obviously I think is super important to talk about was you were very hesitant. And you brought it up in kind of the construction of even your business model. Like you really are a guy that always wants to mitigate risk, right? And you were very hesitant when we started talking. And tell me a little bit about kind of what was going through your head in that process. What was kind of making you so hesitant? And ultimately, what kind of nudged you over the edge?
Yeah. So kind of thinking back on it now, I think my hesitancy was rooted in um, just not being totally sure and totally confident that this was the right track or system for me. I think having not ever had a business coach,
Yeah.
um, I think that was a big part in kind of, I was trying to do my due diligence and having a number of conversations. And as you know, I asked for some numbers of people that you had worked with, right? To try to
Yep.
like have a conversation of what was it like? What was your experience? How was the implementation process? So I think it was really just, I am naturally a little risk averse, more of a risk averse person.
Yeah.
But I think it was just making sure that it was the right fit. And I think it took us 3 hour, if not longer, long conversations for me to get there, right? But
Yeah.
I think I also ultimately needed to feel like I could trust you,
Yeah.
even if maybe I didn't in that moment when we first started, but we could get there. So
For
I
sure.
just like, as you know, being a trainer and a coach, like you develop a level of trust with your patients and clients, and no different, when I was going to hire somebody to teach me how to operate this thing that I've started, and or improve this thing that I've started. So
Yeah.
I needed to feel that there could be a level of trust there, and it took us a while to get there, but we got there.
Of course, man, and I'm glad that we did. You brought something up that I think is really important, um, and I think a lot of people out there kind of struggle with this concept as well. Like, you had never worked with a business coach before. You had never sought out this kind of help. Do you think part of it was just also that there was uncertainty around, like, why did you actually need the support that, you needed? How would you actually get value out of the coaching? Like, do you think that there was some of that also built into a little bit of that hesitancy?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's uncertainty whether or not we talked a lot about kind of like return on investment, right? And
Sure.
that's totally uncertain. Like I might work with you and we might get 3 months into this and I'm paying you X amount of dollars and like I'm not seeing anything move on my end, right?
Yeah.
And so that was a fear of mine, is like I'm gonna get through 3, 4, 5 months of this program with Ray and I'm not gonna see any return on this. It's gonna be not only won't call it a waste of time, but I'm gonna have used a lot of time and a lot of money and haven't not gotten
Resource, yeah.
resource. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But as you know, the rest is history, I guess. Once I started to see change and
Yeah.
see some, some tangible return on the investment, then I was obviously in and
Yeah,
sold.
because we wouldn't be having this conversation had it gone a non productive ROI, right?
Yeah,
But I think a lot of people get stuck in that limbo.
yeah,
And it's kind of hard for them to get out of it because it's hard for them to see that the path that they're going down is potentially the riskier path than the one where they actually invest in the right kind of coaching, the right kind of support. But it's hard to see that in the moment. Um, what were some of the things that were going on in your business that even prompted us reaching out in the first place? That even, that what were some of the problems that you had seen that were really holding you back from, like, fully being out of the PRN role, fully being on your own? Like, what were some of the things you were experiencing there?
well, I always and we talked about this early on, like I always saw kind of a hybrid model as not only the future of like professionally how our profession
And
is moving, like
hybrid meaning in person and virtual, not meaning in person and insurance, just to clarify for those out there.
yeah, so a combination of in person and virtual.
Yeah,
I always kind of saw that as the future, and I was really intrigued about that even when I was working in, like opportunities for telehealth and like remote patient
sure.
monitoring, it's that sort of stuff. I was intrigued by that when I was working in the hospital. And so when I started my practice, I knew I wanted to incorporate that somehow, but I didn't know how.
Yeah.
So I think that's why initially I was attracted to, kind of your system and your model and your support, was because I knew you could help me do that. And I saw that again, it took me a little bit to get there, but I didn't necessarily know how to do that on my own. And I needed to find somebody that did successfully implement something like that. And then have the trust that and faith in myself that I would be able to put in the work and build the systems to do that.
Yeah, and that's huge. And the thing that we generally see when people go out and do that on their own is they set it up in a way that is far too similar to what the traditional PT, the traditional insurance model is set up, because like the reality is until you reshape your perspective of the profession, like that's the way a lot of cash PTs start, right? They just kind of are like they're doing similar things that they would do in the insurance model and the cash model. And then it's hard for them to figure out the value proposition of why would a client even come over to a cash clinic when they could go to the insurance clinic? And if you don't have a drastically different experience, the answer is correct. Like, why would they? So we often see a lot of people who set this thing up. Like, one, they're generally undercharging for the virtual aspect or not charging at all. Two, they don't understand how to position the offer in a way that actually makes it valuable to the client. And three, it's not really integrated into their journey well. Now, from my perspective, I think one of the biggest things that we had worked on was just kind of like your overall sales process, your overall sales conversations. Talk a little bit about maybe like what you were doing and what were some of the tweaks that we made, as we started working together and as we started kind of nudging you a little bit more on the discomfort spectrum to, get the outcomes that we know we can get with our clients.
Yeah, I think when I first started out, I was, underpricing and
Yeah.
through that, like undervaluing my own services and also not taking into account the extra time that I was putting in to really, craft highly tailored, customized like home programs and details and follow up messaging and all of that. And I mean, that is more time that you do need to take into consideration. So I wasn't, and then I was basically going visit to visit.
Yeah.
Sometimes week to week, and not
Yeah,
really
so not doing packages, not having anything predictable within the business.
right, exactly. Just, every month was kind of hitting a reset button, which is
Yes.
hard when you're, have a house and family and a baby on the way sort of thing. So
Yes.
I knew
Yes.
I needed to do something different.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's kind of like what I was doing, going week to week and also underpricing slash undervaluing my own services.
Yeah, why do you think you had initially gone with the prices that you went with?
Uh, comfort. Comfort.
Yeah.
I think I was just the I was I think with price, you need to kind of look at the marketplace. What are other people doing? But also there's this aspect of, well, what do I actually feel comfortable and confident talking about and with someone? And that took a lot of work
Yeah.
to get there and get to where I'm at now. And it took a lot of conversations with you. And just like anything else, it took repetitions. The more that you do
Yeah.
it, the easier it gets to have that conversation. So um, you know, I've gotten there, and I'm pretty confident with where I'm at now, and really happier than with where I'm at now. So,
Good.
but it took effort and it took work for sure.
I think, and again, you're not alone, right? Like I've told this story before, but when I started my cash clinic, I was making $50 an hour at the nursing home, right? So in my mind, I was like, well, if I'm going to make $50 an hour working for somebody else, why don't I just make $60 an hour working for myself? And that was actually how I created my first prices. I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then I was like, well, wait a second, why are massage therapists getting $90 a session? Why are personal trainers getting 60, 75, $90 a session? And here I am, a physical therapist, like I've got to figure out what I'm missing. And I did get a piece of advice that was like, you have to pick a number that is uncomfortable to say, but higher than you want to go.
Mhm.
And for me, like that number was 90. And I think a lot of PTs starting out, that's kind of where they're at, right? And again, like the cash rate at the clinic I was at was 90. So I was like, oh, that makes sense. But the cash experience was the same. And I think a lot of people fall into that same $90 to $100 kind of trap. And they don't realize how hard it is to actually create the business, the life that you want to create when you're kind of stuck at that price point. Would you kind of agree with that mindset of how you were thinking about your pricing when you kind of entered the space originally?
Yeah, totally. I thought of a price that was better than what I was doing, at a
Sure.
per diem, for example, and I thought that that ultimately was a win. But working with you and also thinking about things in a different way, like I know that I'm happy seeing like, 3, 4, 5 people in a day. And then taking
Yeah.
time after seeing those people to, create their home program, update, whether it's True Coach or whatever platform I'm using for them, take that time afterwards. And all of that is time. And if you give yourself a 7, 8, 9 hour work day, like, and you look at the numbers, you need to kind of shift things around in order to make it work, unless you're,
Yes.
seeing 8, 10,
Unless
12.
you're trading for volume.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
so there was that trade-off that you helped me understand of, like quality and volume. And once I started looking at it like that, I realized that the only way for me to be able to give everything that I wanted to give and what I thought I was capable of giving, and the quality of work that I was capable of delivering, the only way to do that was to raise price and see less people. So
Yeah.
just to offer more value.
We tell people all the time, like, we're not the hustle and grind company. Like, we're the figure out what you wanna do, and we'll help you create it. Right? If that's working 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, cool. Like, let's just construct your business in a way where the numbers make sense to support that. Now, if it is that you want to grow and scale multiple people, that's a totally different way of building a business, and that's nothing necessarily wrong. But we have to make different decisions depending on the type of business that you really want to create and the type of life that you want to live, right? I think that's just super important for people to understand that, like, when you're picking a coach to work with, when you're picking a company to work with, do you want the type of business that that company is going to help you create? I think that that's huge. Do you want the lifestyle that those people are going to help you get? Do you want the problem set that those businesses are going to create for you? Because in reality, like, every business, every decision has a problem set that we choose, and we learn to deal with those problems. We don't always solve all of them. Um, what was something throughout kind of the program, throughout some of the coaching that you feel like was maybe the most impactful for you to, both get the ROI, right? A pretty significant ROI on your investment, and both from like a personal mindset growth perspective.
Um, I think it was diving into like really understanding the motivation or the why that in why that patient is seeking help and why at that
Yeah.
time. So kind of getting into like the journey aspect of the patient and how what I was able to do and what I would do for them. So outlining kind of plan of care and what that looks like, and kind of forecasting, you know, what they'll be able to do in the future, however many visits into the future, like being able to have that conversation and kind of unpack the real why behind why that person is seeking services, and then tie that into my value proposition,
Yeah.
if you will, or my services. I think blending those things really has set me up for more success in getting patients to really kind of trust and have buy-in earlier on. I thought I did that well, and previously, and when I was working in different practices and larger systems, and I thought I was getting good buy-in, and maybe I was, but I found that like the conversations that we had about how to really kind of unpack why is this person in front of you in this moment, and
Yeah.
what's really the kind of like the limiting factor, and then tie that into how I can support them and get them to their future better self, was really powerful.
You bring up a really good point because I do think when you were in the insurance-based clinic that you were getting good buy-in, but you were getting good buy-in in a different contextual experience where the buy-in was to the plan, not just to the resources to spend to get the plan, right?
Mhm.
And that's a big shift. One of the things that I remembered working with you was when you got surface level answers from clients, you tended to just be like, okay, that's their problem. And I think a lot of people do that. And I remember doing a lot of coaching with you being like, hey, like, but how is that problem actually affecting their life? And how is the problem affecting their life actually getting them to affect their personality as a human being? Like, we need to get them to really understand the impact that this problem is having on them so that there's urgency for them to actually move to the next step. And then we have to create that clarity of like, what's this journey actually going to look like in the portions that we go along the way, and crafting the recommendation versus like options, right?
Mhm.
We've got to step into the authority that we are as physical therapists in this realm, and not just like an option provider of, oh well, you can do this, you can do that. It's like, no, this is the recommendation of how we get you back to whatever activity it is. Would you say that that's a fair summary of like from a problem depth perspective as well?
Yeah, yeah, I think like kind of taking um a little bit more authority or kind of like ownership over that patient's journey and plan of care, and being able to present that in a way that they understand and makes sense to them, but also they can kind of see the future self, if their future
Yeah.
self, if you will, if they do work with you, right? So there's that piece of it. And you know, like working with runners, for example, like when I would used to see a running related injury, it's like, all right, this person's a runner, they love to run, like let's get them back to running. But now, like the questions that I ask and the deeper understanding, I just feel like I'm able to have that much more impact, because I
Yeah.
know, for example, like no, like running is this person's like this is their true drug. This is their getaway from,
Mhm.
their break during the middle of the day when they have whatever job. Like it just, I'm able to ask better questions, and through that process get better buy-in.
What did you notice happen to your commitment and package conversion rate, and also resistance level when you did raise your prices? Like, what did you notice kind of happen from a business sense when you implemented those changes?
Um, Less resistance. Yeah,
Less
just
less resistance,
yeah,
higher conversion rate generally, right? And
yeah.
I know that that was the case in yours, and more clients moving on to packages,
Mhm.
which ultimately created some more stability and upside for you within the business.
Yeah, I think when you outline that, when you have the package and you can outline that plan of care and what you're going to be, how you're going to be using those visits, it's there's this level of clarity that on the
Mhm.
patient side that occurs, versus like going week to week. You're kind of just like unsure of, all right, when is this going to end? What am I doing next week? Right. So
Yeah.
when you have kind of like that plan of care outlined, and you have the implementation of when, maybe the virtual or hybrid, or if virtual coaching is going to come into play, and when it's going to turn into more of a hybrid experience. I think the patient or client just like has more clarity on, how am I going to get to that point, and get better ultimately.
And what did layering the prescriptive exercise program from like a recurring revenue standpoint, what did that kind of do for you within the business as well?
Well, it took off a little stress at the start of each month for sure.
For sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think just having that kind of continuity and that kind of oversight allowed me to deliver a better product, better service.
Yeah.
But financially, just kind of keeps things. It raises the floor. Ultimately, you aren't hitting the reset button every month.
Yeah,
Uh,
having a couple $1,000s that comes in no matter what, right? Where it doesn't matter if you're selling packages or sessions. if you don't have a mechanism of recurring revenue, you're literally starting every month at zero. Now, that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you're going to end up at zero. The chances of that are relatively low, but the stress around that thought, I think, is relatively high, right? And I think that that's part of the anxiety that a lot of solo practitioners or even just, multi-practitioner clinics that they struggle with is like every month becomes an acquisition game. And we really teach like this really strong retention offer that also solves a significant problem for your client so that when they are out of pain, they still are working on a different problem set, right? And that's the return to sport aspect. Um, what is life kind of like now for you, after working together and, with all the systems that we've implemented and all the things that you've kind of done really well putting into your business, like what's life like now?
Um, I mean, better for sure. In lack of a better term, for sure, better. I just think like being part of. So first of all, it was definitely a fast track to getting to where I'm at now.
What do
Um,
you mean by that?
I don't. If I hadn't done the program and worked with you and had the exposure that I had to others doing certain things, I think that's
Yeah.
a really positive aspect of the program is the community aspect and the conversations that I had and just the posts and seeing what other people are doing and stuff was really powerful and just kind of like opens your eyes to like, okay, well that would work really well with my business. Like I should think
Yeah.
about doing something like that. Whereas otherwise, I wouldn't. So I think the things that I'm looking at doing now and implementing, kind of everything from lead generation to marketing to different programs. Like I don't know. It's hard to say where I would be if I hadn't worked with you. So it's
Yeah.
kind of vague in that nature. But
Yeah.
I just don't think I would be looking at these things now. And being able to also giving myself a little bit of space to be creative and think about different ways to kind of grow the business. Probably still be hustling and grinding and going, week to week sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, money doesn't solve all problems, but it solves a good amount of the problems that business owners have.
Yeah.
And I think with you, we were able to come in, and I think it was around like 6, 7x where you were from just a financial point. That's pretty significant from a peace of mind standpoint, right? Like that's pretty significant when you have what your son is less than a year as well,
9 months.
right?
Yeah.
9 months old, right? Like that's a significant stressor in life when you're trying to build a business, you're trying to be a supportive husband, you're trying to be a dad that's actually home with your kid. Like that takes off a lot of the stress, a lot of the pressure.
Yeah. Definitely.
What advice would you give to maybe the past version of yourself, the person that's maybe on the edge, the person that's hesitant, the person that doesn't yet know how to get value out of coaching or is scared that they won't get value out of coaching? Like, what advice would you give to that person if they were sitting here today?
I would still tell that person to do your due diligence and do your
Sure.
research and have conversations. Sometimes three of them, an hour um, have conversations, ask questions, and really kind of make sure it's a good fit for you. And but also kind of on that same note, if that person is doing or has done the thing that you want to do, then chances are then they're going to show you how to be successful and what things you need to do. But you also need to do the work and put in the time
100%.
and implement, right? So there's no way around that. But any type of investment can be scary. The bigger the investment, the scarier it is for sure. But at some point, you do need to kind of make a change. Otherwise, nothing will change. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that I think that's at the core of why we started working together. Probably is just needed to do something, and I felt like it was a good fit.
And for those of you watching this, like, it is scary. It is scary to click submit when you know that you need something, but there is money attached to it, right? But when you figure out how to get value from coaching, which is different than expecting value from coaching. When you figure out how to get value from coaching, when you figure out that you can't just consume information, you have to actually put it into action in order to get what you want out of it. Like that is really the thing that we help a lot of people do. We're not just going to tell you to go do the thing, right? I think that's lazy coaching. We're going to help you figure out why you have resistance to doing the thing. Why are you resistant to saying this high number? Why are you resistant to going into a package sale? Why are you resistant to start selling a prescriptive exercise program, a virtual offer within your clinic? Because until we break down that barrier, until we break down that roadblock, like you're not going to be able to do it. So I think that that's one of the things that really makes us unique in the experience of just how we coach in general. And I hope that the people out there listening kind of get some confidence from your leap, right? Of eventually saying, "Hey, I've got to move from this conservative nature to it's time to make the move and it's time to invest." And I hope that that shapes some of your decision making in the future as well. Um,
Yeah.
Bryan, anything else to leave them with, or where can also people find you, if they're looking to connect with you?
You can find me on my business email is motiveptny. My website is motiveptny.com. You can find me at Instagram at motiveptny. And then email is info@motiveptny. If you ever want to reach out or talk, I'm happy to chat and tell you a little bit more about my experience. But yeah, I would say, you know, there's risk tied to any decision, for
Yep.
sure. But you know, trust the process and have faith and put in the work, and you will kind of be happy on the when you kind of come out of that coaching process. So
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate everything that you did for me, Ray.
Well, I appreciate you doing everything that you did within the program, and I'm honestly honored to be able to work with you, and humbled to have great clients like you in the program who have um, done the work and really get to break some of the narrative that the profession needs to stay where it is. Like you're out there living proof that the profession is evolving. And the last thing that I'll leave you with is I know Bryan brought up the investment or the risk of investing, but don't forget there is also risk involved with staying exactly where you're at. So, with that being said, if y'all have any questions, please reach out to Bryan. I know he'd totally be down to chat with you. And if you're interested in learning more about the performance provider growth model, you can head over to our website, engagemovement.com. You can check out one of our free trainings on it. You can DM me on Instagram at Ray Gorman DPT, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have. So, Bryan, thank you very much for your time, man. I think that the world will appreciate your story, and I'm pumped for you, man.
Thanks, Ray.